Good day, everyone. We're on to Module 7. So last time we introduced language sample analysis. Now we're going to transition into collecting language samples. We're going to provide an overview of some general principles of collecting a language sample and then give you some guidance on how to collect your first sample. So let's get started. Traditional professional learning for language sample analysis will have you sit and do 10 or more hours of training on elicitation, transcription, coding, analysis, and interpretation before you go to try it on a student. However, we know in the real world you don't have 10 free hours to complete in-depth training with no application, especially at this time of year. Based on your feedback, we know that you want to start with clinical application right away. Also, we believe that learning is more meaningful when you can practice with students early on. So we're going to have you get started with language sampling this module. Those of you new to language sampling won't have full mastery of everything, but you'll be able to get started and refine your skills over time. We're going to spend the rest of this year and a good chunk of next year on language sampling, so there will be plenty of time to cover everything. Our goal for this module is to collect a sample and complete some type of preliminary analysis on it. Based on our surveys with you, we know that most people complete what they consider to be an informal language sample. Most often with informal language samples, we find some way to get a child talking, and then we write some utterances and calculate MLU or summarize our general impressions. Let's take a look at some issues when we collect our samples without a lot of structure or purposeful planning. If we're collecting play-based or conversational language samples, the context and what we do can have a big impact. We might choose activities that don't encourage speaking or ask a lot of closed-ended questions. In this case, the child might not talk very much, and we may underestimate their language skills. Conversely, if we choose activities that promote conversations and use good language stimulation techniques, such as asking open-ended questions, being a good communication partner, if we do this, we may see the child produce longer utterances with more vocabulary diversity. We can see how differences in our elicitation can have a significant impact on children's language production. Let's think about how we collect narratives. Often we'll ask a student to tell a story. Now, there's a lot that can happen if we're not thoughtful about it. If a child tells a very familiar story, like the Three Little Pigs, we may see nice, strong language skills with good narrative organization. However, if we have the student tell a less familiar story that's overly complex, it may look like he has language problems when in fact our choice of story had a negative impact on his production. To increase consistency and promote optimal levels of language output, several research groups have developed elicitation protocols. I have a few of them on the screen here. On the left, we see the SALT expository protocol. One thing you'll notice with this protocol is that it has a script so that every student is getting the same type of instructions. On the right, we have our SLAM cards, which a lot of you have seen. And like our standardized norm reference tests, we have the consistent picture that all students are producing, that they're all talking about. Yet, it being a language sample protocol, there's a level of naturalistic discourse. In the middle, we have the narrative language measures. And again, it has a script and it has specific types of features that we prompt and that we're looking for. So why am I making such a big deal about protocols? Well, one, I really like them because they're purposeful. They set out in a purposeful way of getting kids talking, of getting high levels of language produced, and also looking at particular genres. We can be very purposeful and specific in looking at conversational discourse versus narrative discourse versus exposition or expository. Also, all of these protocols that we're sharing, they've gone through a level of research and development, so they've been vetted. There's a level of validity and reliability with them. They were designed and tested and trialed to see how we can get kids talking and observe their language. Finally, we tend to get consistent data. If we're doing the same protocol from time 1 to time 2, then we're consistently looking over time. If we want to compare to age or grade benchmarks, we can have our student complete a task. that other students have completed that gave the benchmark data. So having that consistency allows us to have greater confidence in our interpretation. Now, when we're thinking about how we elicit a sample, we want to be very purposeful. And this is what we really want you to focus on for this module. So first, we want you to choose an elicitation method that's going to answer your clinical questions. We introduced some of this last time, but all of the different materials are there for you to see which is the best tool to answer your questions. Now, just like any new test, we want to really spend some time understanding what the expectations are so that we need to read the protocol. We need to have materials available for us. We need to collect the sample and really thinking about fidelity, right? Are we adhering to the protocol and administering it as it was intended? Now, because we're looking at this relatively transitory event of discourse and speech, we need to go back and reflect on it, right? So it's really a best practice to record the sample as well. Don't need to overthink it. Don't need a high quality recorder. For the most part, everyone has an app on their phone and it has a level of security. And that's what most folks do, is record it right on their phone. Now, thinking of our goal for Module 7, we want you to get out there. We want you to try this out. We want you to collect a sample. We want you to complete some type of analysis. Really, we're trying to focus on learning by doing, getting some experience, and refining our skills over time. So let's think about where you're at. We know that most of you are in this beginner level, right? So you've done some informal language samples, haven't really followed many protocols. However, we also know that a lot of you have a fair amount of experience, right? This is one of the issues with professional learning in language sampling in a whole district, is you're going to be all over the place. And we also know that some of you are very well experienced and have a lot of deep knowledge about how to complete. Now let's think about where you specifically are. We want to meet you where you're at. So if you're new to a certain technique, elicit a sample. For example, if you're interested in cubed, we'll get you going on collecting a sample and completing a preliminary analysis. Now, if you are familiar with a technique, if you have some experience, we encourage you to refine your practices. For example, if you are a regular SALT user and you collect different types of narrative samples or expository samples, it's a good time to check back in, to calibrate yourself, to look at those protocols and make sure that you're following them as they were intended. Now, we also know that some of you have a lot of experience. In fact, you can teach us all a lot about how you implement language samples, and you can really serve as a resource to your colleagues through your own experience and knowledge, and we will draw on that experience and ask you to serve as that resource as we continue. So I want you to note, one thing I'm a little concerned about with this approach is if we just start implementing language sampling and we learn by doing, there is a fair chance of some inaccuracy with early assessments. Therefore, we really recommend that any early attempts, if you haven't gone through the full training, that you use them for lower stakes assessment. So it could be a supplement to your comprehensive evaluation where you have other high quality data that you're really drawing on to make those high stakes decisions. Or I think it works really well to collect a language sample as part of your progress monitoring for a student who's currently on your caseload. We do anticipate that with time, you will become much more accurate with your language sampling practices, and it will become a much more prominent part of your comprehensive assessments. So looking to the application activity, we want you to spend your time collecting a sample. You don't need to do anything in your learning log. You're going to share what you did at the next community of practice. We'll just quickly ask you what you did so we can document it, and then you can also share your experience with your colleagues. And finally, please don't wait to do this. This is not something you can do the day before our community of practice, so please take a look at some of the protocols, think of what you want to do, and find a student and do it. So last time we introduced a couple of common language sample techniques: SALT, sugar, cube, SLAM. If you want to look back and remind yourself what those were, we have a link here, but we're going to assume that you've picked a way to go. So we have materials for you on elicitation as well as some type of preliminary analysis. So you can pick your poison here, pick what you want to go for, go to the bookmark, and we'll point you towards materials and at least an initial way where you can complete some analyses. I do want to draw your attention that we linked our general rubrics in with SALT because we what we did is we have a couple of basic language sample protocols here, a basic conversation or play-based discourse analysis following a SALT protocol. But then what we did was, it's kind of cool. We put together a rubric you could score based on Wisconsin academic standards. So if you work with younger students and you don't know where to start at all, this might be an easy lift, and we'd love to hear your feedback on this rubric. I thought it was really cool. We also have a simple protocol for a story for a student to tell that they know. So a favorite book, movie, something like that. And again, we put together a general rubric based on academic standards. And then we have some additional SALT protocols here that each one of these has a rubric that you could examine or use to examine the student's production and some benchmark data. So even if you're not going to do a full SALT transcription and you want to follow a standardized protocol and score a rubric and look at some data, you can do that. We went into quite a bit of detail on these other approaches last time. So if you have any questions, be sure to let me know. And we really look forward to hearing how this goes. And by now, you know the routine. As soon as you're done watching this video, we appreciate you taking the time to do our module completion survey. We have a link for you, or you can pause the screen here and do the QR code. As always, we're here to help. If you have any questions, you come up with anything, you need some more elaboration, or just want to talk through anything, we're just email away. So I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to hearing how this goes with you.